everybody. Today I'm going to give you an overview of what to expect in the training to become a culture bump facilitator. And I'm also going to give you some background information on the development of the whole culture bump approach to dealing with differences. The way this will happen is in just a moment I'll leave the screen and you'll see a PowerPoint and you'll hear my voice explaining each of the slides. And I will come back between each PowerPoint presentation to set up the next one. So without further ado, let's begin with an overview of what to expect in the training to become a culture bump facilitator. The culture bump approach differs from multiculturalism and diversity training in a couple of ways. Number one, those approaches look at categories of people and study those categories. The culture bump approach, however, focuses on a specific difference that an individual has experienced and uses that real life experience to understand the others and oneself. This does a couple of things. Number one, it allows us to look at people as being in process rather than simply being a product of their culture. It also empowers us to own our own culture bumps and to use them to actually find common ground with another person. The culture bump approach has a number of things. We will focus on the steps. We will also focus a great deal, some on theory, and we'll focus, for those of you who want to use it for training or teaching, you'll have that. We'll all emerge with a new skill set and with enough information about what's been published about it to know what we're doing. The culture bump definition of culture is very different. It again focuses on the individual and allows people to belong to many different groups, so that when we're focusing on, for example, Republicans and Democrats, we're literally looking at two different cultures, even though the people may be married to one another. So, moving on. As a facilitator, you have knowledge of very basic intercultural content. We're going to be using national culture as a way to understand the culture bump process, but you're also going to learn about healing circles and how to use those together. You'll also learn about how the steps and these different modules correlate to one another. You'll also emerge with a number of specific skills. For example, you're going to know how to move people through a healing circle, the different stages of the healing circle. For those of you who are interested in training, you'll be able to use it for facilitating. And emotional intelligence, you'll become very conscious of how to manage your emotions associated with the bump, so that you can actually detach yourself from the bump and you have the bump doesn't have you. So what you begin to, and you are able to move from the difference to finding the human commonality, back to the difference, and back to the commonality in a cycle that literally trains our mind to be able to move beyond differences with much more agility. The processes that we'll work with have to do with the culture bump steps, a great deal with mirroring, which is when groups of people talk about one another. Think about what it's like on Facebook today. So instead of doing what we're doing on Facebook, that we use this as a way to understand ourselves and to reconnect, to find the common ground, to get ourselves grounded so that we can then find common ground. The adjustment cycle is used not only for culture, but also for change, how our country is changing, and how we can move through that with more easily. Literally, this is about having time to heal ourselves and then to reconnect with one another. And you will have the whole toolkit to use as in any way that you like. And one of the things that you will have at the end of the training is a guide to using each of the modules in the toolkit. I hope that gives you a little idea about what to expect over these next 2 weeks. There's one other thing that I'd like to introduce you to in this module, and that is an introduction to how a culture bump can be analyzed. And what I'm going to use is a culture bump that I had with a young man from Venezuela. And again, you will see the PowerPoint and an explanation of how I analyzed my culture bump with him and what the outcome was of that analysis. So what is a culture bump? A culture bump is just a cultural difference. It could be any number of things. Something that somebody says, the way they say it, something that somebody does, the way that somebody dresses, anything that is different than the way I would do, say, or do that. That's a culture bump for me. And remember, we're using culture in a very different sense, not just national culture. And these are the steps of what we do when we have a culture bump. There are specific steps that we go through this protocol. So I'm going to talk about a culture bump that I had. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that by using this example. This was a culture bump that I had with a young man named Miguel. The culture bump occurred as Miguel, age 28 from Venezuela, was having a conversation with Karen, age 48 from the United States. I was videotaping their conversation as part of a research project, and they had just met. So they had just met that day, and they were sitting in a little room having this conversation, and it happened about 15 minutes into the conversation. They kind of ran out of things to talk about, and this is what happened. Miguel asked Karen if he had asked her if she had a boyfriend. She had previously told him she was divorced with 2 adult children. After a brief pause, she said, "Actually, I have 4 boyfriends." As they discussed her dating situation, she told him that the men did not know about one another and that one of them lived in Chicago, one lived in Boston, one lived in Cincinnati, and one lived in Houston. At that, Miguel replied, "So you're an international girlfriend." He, Karen, and I all 3 laughed. Now that's steps 1, 2, and 3. In this case, just that little incident was a bump for me. It was something I didn't expect. My reaction was simply to laugh, and what he said was, "So you're an international girlfriend." So there's my bump. The fact that he said that particular phrase. There are a couple of other bumps in there. The fact that that he asked her if she had a boyfriend, it was also a bump, but we can only deal with one at a time. And so we're dealing with, "So you're an international girlfriend." So I recounted his comments to 4 other North Americans, and they all felt that his comment about Karen's being an international girlfriend was out of the range of behaviors they would expect, meaning they also, the phrase, "so you're an international girlfriend," was a little bit different. It was funny and it's not terrible, but it was just not what they would say or they could imagine another American saying. Then I went and talked with some Venezuelans and asked them. And all 4 Venezuelan informants felt that Miguel's comment about an international girlfriend was completely in character for Venezuelans. So what we have is a genuine culture bump. They then explained that the purpose in joking was to make Karen feel comfortable and to express empathy for her. They pointed out that teasing and joking were ways of connecting or of feeling close for Venezuelans. While this answered my question of why Miguel said what he said, it also really reinforced that we're indifferent, that Venezuelans and Americans have different frames of reference about this particular little in this area. Now, step 4 is managing emotions. So when I recall that incident, I remembered feeling surprised, relieved, tickled, and uncertain. I managed my emotions by merely listing my feelings, which unhooked me emotionally from the bump so that I could continue the analysis. Emotions, the first emotion is always either surprise, shock, or stun, depending on the force of the bump. I now needed to do step 5, identify the universal situation, and the why answer given to me by the Venezuelans had already done that. So trying to connect or feel close to someone who has revealed potentially damaging information about themselves is a universal situation. But how different people in different cultures respond in that situation can be quite different. But the situation itself is universal. So step 6 is identifying my own expectations in that situation. After reflecting, I determined that I might expect an American to joke or to reveal similar information about themselves or someone close to them. But of those 2 patterns, the joking would be double-edged in that it alludes to the darker side of the action, while the self-revelation would be much closer to alleviating the discomfort of the other person. And so I've now identified what I expect people to do, or what I prefer people to do. Step 7 is looking at what it means to me to have those expectations met. And what that means is the joking pattern connotes a sense of separation and possibly even disapproval of the behavior, while the revealing of similar information connotes empathy or sensitivity to the other feelings. So I would characterize an American who self-reveals as someone who is sensitive and thoughtful, while I would characterize an American who jokes as someone who is less sensitive and less, perhaps a little bit unsafe. So how do other cultures know when someone is sensitive? I became aware of my blind spot in relation to Venezuelan culture, and incidentally, other cultures also. I might be able to recognize sensitive and thoughtful Venezuelans in general, but I didn't have available to me the underlying criteria that Venezuelans use to make that evaluation. But I'm ready to. Well, that's it. A little bit of a preview of what to expect in your upcoming training to become a culture bump facilitator, as well as a little bit of an explanation about how I analyzed one of my culture bumps with a young Venezuelan gentleman. I'm going to be sending you a couple of forms, one in which I'm going to request that you look at any kind of trainings that you may have had having to do with multiculturalism or with diversity training and how they impacted you. And another one in which you can go ahead and analyze one of your own culture bumps. This could be a culture bump with anyone. It could be a national culture bump. It could be a culture bump between males and females, between Republicans and Democrats, anything that would be different for you. I'm also going to send you a link in which you can take a look at a little video with Karen and Miguel talking, having this conversation. It's really quite amusing. And I'm also going to send you a link to a full explanation of the culture bump that we've just seen. So and please bring all of bring the 3 forms with you next Saturday. So until we meet again for the first day of the training, this is goodbye.